In the spring of 2023, police in Hudson, Ohio were called to perform a welfare check on a 41-year-old university professor after he failed to pick up his young daughter from school, an action that immediately struck his ex-partner as unusual given his consistent involvement in his child's life. Officers arrived at his upscale suburban home on West Streetsboro Street in the early evening and quickly encountered a disturbing scene. A large amount of blood near the back entrance and a man lying motionless on the floor inside. The victim, later identified as Dr. Todd Morgan, a respected finance professor with a strong academic background and a reputation as a devoted father, was found wearing a robe and suffering from severe head trauma. Initial observations left responding officers uncertain whether they were dealing with a suicide, a home invasion, or something far more complex, especially since no weapon was immediately visible at the scene. As they secured the property, they discovered multiple shell casings scattered in different areas of the house, including near the back door and at the base of an interior staircase, suggesting movement during the shooting and a violent struggle or chase inside the residence. The house itself showed mixed signs of disturbance. A child's bedroom had a knocked-over piggy bank, while the master bedroom appeared disheveled with alcohol bottles and personal items scattered, creating an impression of chaos that did not clearly align with a straightforward burglary. Despite this, valuables such as electronics and a luxury vehicle remained untouched, and both wallets and keys were recovered, although the victim's phone was missing, raising early suspicions that the killer may have taken it. As detectives expanded the search, they found multiple firearms inside the home, all registered to the victim, but none matched. The weapon used in the killing, which was determined through autopsy to be a 9mm handgun, discharged multiple times, 7 shots in total, with at least one fired at close range, and others striking critical areas, including the clavicle, any one of which could have been fatal within minutes. Physical evidence also showed that the back door had been forcibly compromised, with broken framing and a detached piece of the lock found outside, while blood patterns and footprints extended from inside the home out onto the deck and toward the driveway, indicating that someone had moved through the scene after the shooting. Investigators carefully ruled out first responders after comparing shoe tread patterns, concluding that the prints belonged to an unknown individual who had fled the property. As neighbors were interviewed, the case began to shift from a mysterious death to a targeted homicide. Several residents reported hearing what sounded like gunshots around 7:20 a.m. that morning, although they initially dismissed the noises as possible construction or vehicle backfire. One couple provided particularly important testimony, stating they saw a light-colored compact vehicle parked near the victim's Porsche earlier that morning and observed a person moving between the car and the house, carrying what looked like a package, before returning to the vehicle and leaving shortly after. The sounds of multiple bangs. A Ring camera image further confirmed the presence of an unfamiliar vehicle at the property during the early morning window, which disappeared shortly after the incident timeframe, strengthening the theory that the crime had been committed by an outside visitor rather than someone already residing in the home. As investigators dug deeper into Dr. Morgan's personal life, they discovered a complicated background involving previous relationships, including a failed marriage tied to infidelity and a subsequent relationship with a student, along with ongoing custody arrangements with 2 different mothers of his children. Reports also suggested he struggled with alcohol use, monitored through a breathalyzer system connected to an app that tracked his sobriety, with his last recorded test occurring the day before his death. Despite his professional success and reputation as a caring father, there were hints of personal instability and complicated romantic entanglements that broadened the scope of possible motive. The investigation took a major turn when detectives learned that a 911 call had been placed from the victim's residence at approximately 7:21 a.m., just minutes after neighbors reported hearing gunshots. However, no one spoke on the call, and authorities believed it may have been an accidental activation from a smartphone's emergency function. During the chaos of the incident, tracing the call led them to a woman named Terriana Paschel who matched the description of a slim individual with long hair seen near the property and was associated with a silver crossover vehicle resembling the one spotted at the scene. Phone records revealed something even more significant. Her device and the victim's phone had traveled together at high speed along a nearby interstate shortly after the time of death, after which the victim's phone stopped moving entirely and was never recovered despite extensive searches. As investigators followed digital evidence, they uncovered additional links between Terriana and Dr. Morgan, including communications through a dating app that transitioned into private messaging and financial transactions. Records showed that on the morning of the murder, The victims sent a small payment followed by a much larger attempted transfer that was never completed, likely interrupted by the unfolding events. Surveillance footage, phone location data, and forensic evidence such as shoe impressions and DNA found on items inside the home further connected Terriana to the crime scene. Investigators also discovered online searches conducted from her device after the murder, including queries about the case, her own name, and whether police could track a phone after a SIM card was removed, behavior that suggested awareness of being under scrutiny. Additional evidence linked her to prior criminal investigations, including a firearm connected to an earlier unsolved case, strengthening suspicions of involvement in violent activity. When confronted by detectives, she denied knowing the victim and claimed no recollection of the events, but was confronted with overwhelming digital, physical, and financial evidence placing her at the scene during the exact time frame of the murder. Investigators outlined the combination of Cash App transactions, GPS tracking, vehicle sightings, DNA traces, and recovered forensic materials that contradicted her statements. Ultimately, prosecutors built a case showing that she had traveled to the victim's home, interacted with him, and was present during the fatal shooting, though the exact sequence of events remained pieced together from circumstantial and forensic data rather than direct eyewitness testimony. Facing mounting evidence and the likelihood of conviction at trial, she ultimately accepted a plea agreement rather than proceed through court proceedings. Under the agreement, she pleaded guilty to aggravated murder and related firearm charges, receiving a sentence of 20 years to life plus additional mandatory time, with parole eligibility beginning after more than 2 decades. In court, the victim's family delivered emotional statements describing the devastating impact of the loss, particularly on his young daughter who had waited at school expecting her father to arrive as usual, only to learn he would never return. They described a man who had been deeply involved in his children's lives, affectionate and playful despite personal struggles, and whose absence left a permanent void. The defendant offered a brief apology before sentencing, expressing remorse but providing no further explanation for the events that led to the fatal encounter. The case concluded with her taken into custody to serve her sentence, while the community and family were left to process the tragic loss of a father, professor, and son whose life ended abruptly under violent and deeply complicated circumstances.